to our Crazy Life Scotland and a very special Christmas in July edition of my Craft and Chat series. If you're new here, my name is Fiona and I do Christmas crafts all year round. Apart from January, I have January off, but the rest of the year I do Christmas crafts because I love Christmas, I love crafting, so Christmas crafting is my happy place. I started this Craft and Chat series this year. I must confess I hadn't put a Craft and Chat video up for a while, and I apologise. This Christmas in July series, which is being hosted by the lovely Claire over at Claire's Crafty Corner, gave me the motivation to start putting up craft videos again. I'm hoping I'm not too late to join her collaboration, and I will put the playlist details in the description below. And in this video I am going to be making a gorgeous Christmas scene with a polar bear using 3 different types of JDiction resin. Now, I put a video up a few days ago talking about a meeting that I had with the CEO of JDiction, and it was a brilliant meeting. I was so impressed with the company. They have kindly sent me out their Epoxy Resin, their UV Resin, so that I can show you the different types and how to use each one. So in this video I'm going to use all 3 in the one project. So exciting. I'm not the most advanced resin artist ever. I'm self-taught through YouTube. I've been doing it for about 1.5 years. But this project uses a few different techniques that I have seen on various videos here on YouTube. I've not seen anyone making the actual scene that I'm going to do, so I don't think I'm copying anyone there. But the techniques that I'm going to use, I have picked up through watching other people's videos. Right, enough yapping. Let's get on with it. Right, please excuse my silicone mat. It is not dirty, it's well loved. That's my excuse. Right, I like to get organised at the beginning so that I know I've got everything here that I need. So here are the resins that I'm going to be using. Thanks again to JDiction for gifting me these. I'm not paid or sponsored by them. All opinions are my own, but they have kindly sent these products to me. So we've got the high viscosity UV resin, the normal UV resin, hard type, and the epoxy resin, which is 1:1 ratio by volume, not weight. Right, I have also got my nail lamp and a little torch for curing the UV resin. They were from Temu, as are all of the moulds that I'm going to use today. I myself confess, Temu addict, I can't help it. So this mould, which looks like a bit like a bottom, is actually a polar bear, and wait till you see how cute it is. So I'm going to be using that. I'm going to be using this square coaster mould, and I am going to be using this mould, which is a little sign. There's one that says North Pole and one that says Merry Christmas. I think this time I might go for Merry Christmas since it's Christmas in July. What I want to do before I get started is make sure my moulds are clean. I can see a little bit of residue there. That is actually mica powder rather than resin. But what I always do is I just take a bit of tape and I go over all my moulds with it so that if there's any debris, maybe old resin left in it from the last use, or any glitter, or in my case dog hairs, because we have 4 dogs, oh, and a cat. So yeah, I'll always just, even if they look clean, I like to go over them anyway with some sticky tape. Now I am going to fill in the Merry Christmas and the little lines on the pole with red mica powder. I think that might be quite nice. This mica powder was actually also given to me by JDiction about 1 year ago, and as you can see, I've hardly used any of it, and it's not that I don't like it, it's just that there is so much in the tub. I use it all the time. Obviously Christmas crafts, I use a lot of red, and there's still all that left in it. And I'm colouring small details on moulds. I like to use like a nail art dotty pen. And the reason for that is it's got a very fine tip on it, but it's blunt, it's rounded rather than sharp like a cocktail stick, that sort of thing. And I know that I'm not going to damage my silicone mould with it. So I'm just going to get a tiny bit on my pen, my dotty tool, and go inside each of the letters. I'm not too worried if it goes outside the letters, because I will go over it very shortly and just make sure that it's only where I want it. So I'm just going to carry on doing this. I will speed up for you. Right, that's all the writing done. I'm just going to lift it up to make sure that it looks like I've not missed any bits. If I have, I just go back in. You can touch it up once you've demolded anyway, but it gives it a more sort of uniform look if you have it all nice and coloured before you pour the resin. So that looks okay. What I'm going to do is turn it over and tap it to get rid of some of the excess. And then I'm just going to take a bit of tape to see if I can get any of the loose bits off. And finally I'll just go over it with a baby wipe and dry it with some kitchen roll. That looks okay. Now what I want to do is, there's little lines going up the pole. I just want to put a little bit of red on them as well, just to give it a bit of colour. Now I'm using mica powder here, but of course you can use anything you want to colour it. I quite often use acrylic paint markers, or nail polish is another good way of colouring them. And I don't mind if these are a little bit over the line. It's really just to give a bit of definition to the pole when it's done. And you can see the tiny amount of mica powder that you need, because it's very pigmented. It's lovely stuff. Right, I'm going to turn it over, give it a tap. I'll give it a very slight clean up. I don't want to clean it up too much, because it's not actually inside any grooves. It's on top, so if I was to go over it with tape, it would take the whole lot off. So I don't want that. Now remember, I am no expert at this, I'm just showing you the way that I do it. And if you don't have these moulds, you can do something similar with what you have. Don't feel like you have to go out and buy, specific moulds, although these from Temu are so cost effective, it's amazing. So this mould is now ready for later on when we are pouring the epoxy resin. In fact, well, I put a wee bit, I might actually put, I don't normally, I've made this a couple of times now. I'm going to put a little bit of red just in the top of the pole as well. Why not? Because it's a bigger area, I'm going to use a little paintbrush instead of the dotty tool. Like I say, I don't think there's any right or wrong way when it comes to colouring your moulds. You do you, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever technique you like the best, whatever you think looks the best, just go for it. Right, I'm going to put that to the side now. My polar bear mould, I don't need to do anything with. You could, if you wanted, colour where his ears and his nose and things are, but I prefer just to wait and do that at the end. I'm not going to do any more colouring, but what I do want is to get the effect of polar bear paw prints going through snow. So to do that, I'm going to do the water drop technique that I've seen on so many different channels, but rather than a water drop, I'm going to do it in a rough shape of a polar bear print. I googled it and I've got a rough idea what it looks like. It might not be perfect because I'm not an artist, I can't draw, but we're going to go for it. Now this is where I love to use JDiction's high viscosity UV resin. As the name suggests, it's a lot thicker than normal UV resin, and it means it stays in place for longer, allowing you time to cure it and shape it, that sort of thing. I love this for this type of effect. And it's also brilliant for doming as well. When you've finished a piece, just to get that nice little dome on top, the high viscosity is perfect because it stays where you want it. So I am going to have my polar bear probably in this sort of corner. So I might have some polar bear prints going that way. We'll just randomly do them and see what happens. So your UV resin, if you've not used it before, you don't need to mix it or do anything with it. You literally just squeeze the bottle where you want it to go. And because it cures with UV light, you don't need to worry about how long you've got, because it will stay in its raw state, if you like, until you actually cure it with light. If you are in a very, very sunny country, then you might need to either pull your curtains or work relatively quickly with it. But here in Scotland, we don't get much sunshine, so I rely on the UV lamp or the torch to actually cure it. Right, enough talking, let's get on with it. I'm procrastinating, can you tell? Now, I will say, when I'm doing this, you need to keep yourself safe when you're working with resin, especially epoxy resin. It can be it's very toxic to your skin, and always wear gloves when you're using UV resin. I've only got 4 there, he definitely has 5 toes. I don't worry so much about it when I'm doing UV resin because it's not quite as harmful to skin, and I've got small hands, so when I wear gloves, they're always too big for me, and when I'm doing little intricate things like this, the gloves get in the way. So please be safe and wear gloves. I will be wearing gloves and a mask when I'm doing the epoxy resin, but just to let you know, you should do it with UV resin as well. So I'm just going to give this maybe 10-20 seconds with the UV torch before I move on to the next paw print. Now, its toes are very far away from the pad, so I'm going to try and get them a bit quicker, a bit closer next time. Like I say, there is use your own artistic license and try to do it as best you can, but what is it that Claire says? It's made with love, not perfection. I'm doing it again. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I think because I'm on camera, I'm getting stage fright. These are going to be quite weird looking bear paw prints, but let's face it, we've all got our flaws, haven't we? This bear's just got very long toes. So like I say, I'm only doing it for a few seconds just now, because once they're all done, I will put the lamp on the whole thing for about 30 seconds. Yeah, this polar bear's definitely a bit odd, I think. Hey ho. He can be a disabled polar bear like me. If you don't know me, I am in a wheelchair, and I do take the mickey out of myself quite a bit. His legs are awful close together as well, aren't they? Right, this last one, I'm just going to do claw prints because it's like it's going off the edge. There we go. They're not going to be perfect, but then the polar bear's walking through snow, and snow prints never stay perfect, do they? And there's more than one polar bear. I tell myself all these excuses. But at the end of the day, it's mine, it's the way I make it, and I like it. That's all that matters. Don't let anybody tell you that what you make is wrong or doesn't look right, because if it looks right to you, it's right. I'm now going to put the UV lamp over it for about, I'll do 90 seconds twice, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do next. Once the UV resin has cured, I'm going to take a paintbrush and brush over the base of the mould with some chameleon powder. This is the Plum Chameleon Powder by Let's Resin, and I think it's lovely. Yeah, I know he's supposed to be in snow, but chameleon powder really shows up the paw prints very well, and I will get the snow in a different way, so don't worry about that. Again, artistic license. So once this is finished, that is what I'm going to do. Okay, so that's had 90 seconds twice, and I'll just check. It's all perfectly cured, it's not sticky. That's what I love about JDiction UV Resin. Even the high viscosity one cures very well. There's no stickiness to it or yellowing or anything like that. I really do like it. Okay, so I'm just going to try and brush my chameleon powder. I'm going to focus on the paw prints at first. Look how well they turn out when you put the powder over them. It's so nice. What I am going to do, I'm going to try not to get too much chameleon powder round the edges because I want that to look like snow. I'm going to make that white, but I'll show you that in a second. If there is a little bit, it's not a big deal. So once the paw prints are done, I'm just going to dust the rest of the flat bit of the mould, trying not to get too much powder in the edges. I'm going to take my baby wipe again and just go around the edges. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my next UV resin, which is just the hard type. It's the normal viscosity, not high viscosity. And I'm going to put some snow around the edges with UV resin. Now you can use epoxy resin here, but then you need to wait like 24 hours or whatever for it to dry before you can put your next layer on. So I like to do it with UV resin, and the JDiction one is perfect. I love the consistency of it. You can, oh, got a little bit of resin in here. You can add mica powder and glitter to UV resin. You just want to be careful because it does rely on the UV light getting right through it. So if you put too much in it, it might not cure properly. I'm going to need a relatively large amount, but I don't need to fill right up. As long as the bottom of it is coated around the edges, you'll see the snow rather than the dark epoxy that I'm going to put in to show up the chameleon powder. Look how clear that is. That is the other thing. If you're using colorants like mica or glitter, things like that, in UV resin, I would try to either do it in small layers, like do a thin layer and then cure it, then a thin layer and then cure it, or just do a small layer and not add any on, because again, it's just to make sure that it gets a chance to cure properly. If JDiction resin especially, if it doesn't cure, it's user error rather than the resin error, because it is a fantastic resin. And like I said, they're not paying me to say that. I have tried quite a few different resins, UV resins especially, and to me, JDiction is by far the best. Right, so I might just put a little bit of glitter in here as well. These glitters came with the epoxy resin that they sent me. Ooh, I'm knocking everything over. So I'm going to use this lovely white one. And I love that they're in the little small containers because it's so much easier to use. And of course I reuse them once they're empty as well. Decant other things into them. Right, again, I don't want too much. I just want it to have a nice sort of sparkly. Oh, that was too much. I was about to say you can add more but you can't take away. I might have to add more UV resin to this now so that it's more resin than glitter. We'll see how it goes. We might be okay. Right, so like I said, we really just want a thin layer, and I'm just going to use my lolly stick, I think. I'll be there forever. I'll try pouring it in very carefully. I do shake, which makes it harder. Ah! That was the dog's fault. I'll cure that bit and then take it off. In fact, no, I'll just leave it on because it's snow. And again, I'm not going for perfection. Oh, what a mess. Now you know why my silicone mat is in such a mess. I'm a very messy crafter. This looks like it's pretty much the perfect amount. Ah, look at me shaking. Do any other crafters shake like me? And if so, have you got any tips for not making a mess? I don't want to take that off because it's going to take the mica powder with it. So like I said, it's just a very small layer. Once this is cured, I might add more. I'll wait and see what I think. Just spread it out a little bit. You can see how tempted I am to scrape that off, but I'm trying not to. Trying to get rid of any little bubbles. And again, I'm not worried that there's some on the sides because it will give the snow effect to the final piece. I'm just letting any bubbles come up to the top. I don't want to spray it with alcohol because I don't want the mica powder to go everywhere. So I will just use the very, very thin end of my dotty tool to try to burst any little bubbles. And if they don't burst, I will use a long neck lighter. You want to try to keep flames away from your silicone molds so that you don't damage them, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. I'm going to set that just now a couple of times. Right, that's had 2 lots of 90 seconds like that. I'm now going to turn it over and blast it from the other side. It's actually quite thick silicone, so the UV light might not get through it, but we'll give it a chance. Right, I just gave it another couple of minutes on the upside because, just to be safe, because the UV resin has got colour in it, but you can see it's cured nicely. Do I take these bits off now that they're cured? I can't help myself. Oh, look at the wee circle that's left. I'll just redust it. This is going to pull one of the paw prints off maybe. Right, now it is time for the epoxy resin. And like I said, the JDiction epoxy resin is 1:1 ratio by volume, so you measure it in mils or ounces rather than by weight. So I'm now going to be a good crafter, get my gloves and my mask on and get mixing. So I will now go to voiceover because I'll be very muffled with my mask. With epoxy resin, you want to be as accurate as possible with your measurements. So I like to take a Sharpie and just highlight on the measuring cup exactly where I want to fill up to. It makes it a bit easier to see when you're actually pouring your resin. Now I always start with part B because it's thinner than part A, and I find it much easier to do that because when you add part A to the thicker resin to the thinner resin, it starts to mix straight away, and it just makes mixing easier. For me, it was a tip that I saw on YouTube. You don't need to do it that way. As long as you're mixing equal parts, it's fine. So there we go. I'm going on with part A now. Like I said, it is a bit thicker. If it's cloudy, it's usually because of the temperature, so you can give it a nice warm bath before you start pouring it. But the temperature's not too bad here in the UK now, so I just poured it straight away. Use your stirry stick or something to make sure that you get every single bit of that resin out your measuring cup. A, you don't want to waste any resin, and B, like I said, you want your measurements to be as accurate as possible. You want the same amount of A and B in there together. Then you want to give your resin a nice good mix. Now stir very slowly, try not to put your stick in and out of it because that introduces bubbles, and make sure you're scraping the sides and that you're mixing for a good sort of 3 to 5 minutes. Now I have just added some pearl white mica powder to this, and I'm giving it another mix, and here we go with the pouring. I'm going to start with the polar bear, and because this mould has got little nooks and crannies in it, I like to start pouring where they are, and you'll see me giving the mould a good squeeze quite a lot, and that's to make sure the resin is getting into all the little spaces, because it's got holes for its ears and its tail, and you want to make sure the resin gets right in there. It's also a good way to make sure any bubbles rise to the top as well. JDiction's actually pretty good for bubbles. You don't get an awful lot of them. It depends on the mould, and it depends on how you mix it. So there we go, that's the mould filled right up to the top. Another little squish and a squeeze, and now it's time for my sign. I have still got enough of my white resin to complete the sign. Now I'm pouring it in slowly, and I'm trying to go around the edges first because I don't want to smudge the mica powder. Sometimes the mica powder can, if there's any like residue left, it can sort of mix about within the resin, but I did tap it and get most of it off. So I'm just making sure that I've got enough resin in there. Again, I'm going to give this a squish and a squeeze. You can go in with your pokey tool to make sure that it's in all the little areas. However, because I've got mica powder in there, I want to avoid doing that. Again, it can just make the mica powder mix and it doesn't give as good a look. So I make sure I give it as good a squeeze and I tap it on the table and things. And of course, we don't want to waste any resin that's left, so I have got a couple of little Mickey Mouse Christmas decorations which are partly done, and I'm just going to use the white to top them up. I love those little moulds. I can't remember if they were Temu or not. Again, just a little tap on there. Because I have got already cured resin in there, again, I don't want to go in with my pokey stick because I don't want to lift the resin. Right, I'm just going in here with some alcohol spray to try to catch any bubbles, and I'm using my pokey tool to catch a couple of bubbles that rose to the top, just bursting them. Right, so I have mixed more resin off camera, and I'm just going to add a few drops of this black pigment to it. As you can see, I don't add much at all, but it goes very black. Look at that. The reason I'm using black is it shows up the chameleon powder and the paw prints the best, rather than using a lighter one. I kind of have a battle with myself because the polar bear's on snow, but you'll see later you do still get the snow effect. So you mix it very carefully, make sure it's all mixed. And again, because there's mica powder in there, I go around the edges first. Obviously, I have speeded this up a bit. I can't pour that quick. Again, don't waste any resin, it's expensive stuff. And leave that to the side to let any bubbles come up. Again, a little squish and a squeeze to make sure it goes in. I don't want to lift the UV resin so that the epoxy goes under it. Got another bit of overpour there, so I'm just taking my little micro brush to get rid of that. It's easier to do it now, and again another few bubbles have popped up, so I'm just popping them with my pokey tool. Now I'm going to leave it to cure. Good morning everyone, it is now 24 hours or just under 24 hours later and it has cured lovely, and it's now time for my favourite part of the resin creation, which is the unmoulding. I love it. It's that nervous anxiety you get because you think, I hope it looks good, and then you think, what if I've made an absolute mess, and then you think, so what if I have? Let's just get into it. So I'm going to start with the base, I think. So this is the one that we used, the high viscosity resin, to make the paw prints. Oh, look at the mica powder there. To make the paw prints, and then we dusted it with chameleon mica powder. Then we used normal UV resin around the sides for snow, and we just topped it with black resin. Let's have a look. Oh, love it. Ah, that's so nice. Look at the paw prints. Oh, I hope you're getting to see that okay. Sorry about the ring light. Wait, I'll try switching it off or try turning it down a bit. We look at that. I love how it changes colour. There's a blue, a purple. You can see the paw prints really clearly. And of course I forgot it was back to front, so my little polar bear is going to be sitting there and the tracks are going that way. But it's fine, it's fine. And there's a couple that messed up a wee bit, but like I said, when you leave a footprint in the snow, it's not always perfect. And I love how the UV resin came out white. I was worried that the black would show through, but it hasn't. I really like that. Okay. Let's now unmold our polar bear and see what he is going to look like. Every time I've done this, it's worked out perfect, so I'm hoping it's the same again today. Look how easy that comes out the mould. Are we ready? Da, 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 da. Look, he is so cute. So I'm going to use acrylic paint just to paint on some, the details of his face and his ears. There's a wee tiny bit there that's not perfect, but oh, so he will sit there like that. That is perfect. And we have got our sign. There were a few bubbles there, I can see that. I'm not sure what I did there. I did keep going in to pop them. It's maybe because of the writing, but let's unmold it. I'm hoping that the writing has worked out well. It's not bad. It's not bad. Can you see that? Merry Christmas. I've got a little bit of overpour there, but do you know what? I'm going to leave it because it looks a bit like ice. So I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to take it off. And I'm not too worried at the bits there because again, it could be ice covering them. I could go over them, but I might not because I think it's more authentic looking. Like that, and we can see the little stripes that we've got on the pole and the top of it. Love it. So that's going to sit there. Whoops. It's okay, it's going to be stuck on. It usually does stand better than that, but it's okay, it's going to be stuck on. I will show you how in a minute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the little details on to Mr. Polar Bear. So I've got a couple of little acrylic paint pens here. These were from Temu and they're perfect for doing what I need it to do. And I'm just going to, there are little lines where the eyes are, but can be hard to see. So I'm just going to make him sleeping. And here's his wee nose. And there's a little line for his mouth. Look, he's a happy polar bear. He's having sweet Christmassy dreams. So that's better. Sorry if you can hear meowing. My cat's at the window wanting in. I hear you, puppy cat. And there we go. Isn't it amazing how just a couple of bits of acrylic paint can transform a piece? So that will go there. Now what we need to do next is we need to stick them down. Here we go. I'm going to use the JDiction High Viscosity UV Resin again. This is what I always use for this. If I'm wanting to stick anything together with resin, high viscosity to me is the best. So what I'm going to do is, there's no point putting it all underneath them because the UV light won't get there. So I basically just put a bit round the edge. And see how it's staying where I'm putting it, even though I've got it tilted. Pop it down where I want it to go, and then if I squish it, oh, it usually does come out the edges. I've maybe just not put enough on, so we're seeing it a wee bit there. I'll just pop another few wee bits round here. And I'll put a wee bit round the back as well, because you'll see what we're going to do shortly also gives it a bit of security. Right, now I'm just going to pop my lamp on this. We'll do it 90 seconds twice. Okay, so that should be stuck now. Let's see. Yep, it will not move. Look, I can hold it upside down and it's not going to move. It's like magic. I absolutely love that stuff. Right, we're going to do the same now for the sign, but I think rather than putting my lamp over it, which would basically make it fall, I'm going to use my little UV torch. However, if you don't have one of them, you can just hold the lamp over it like that. So I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to use my high viscosity JDiction UV Resin. I'm going to put it all along the bottom of this time. And then I'll pop that about there, I think. If you don't have the Merry Christmas sign mould, you could just put one of the little brush Christmas trees that you get there instead. And I've got a mould as well that makes little parcels, so you could put something like that there. It's entirely up to you. Right, let's have a look at how that is looking now. Merry Christmas! Yay! I'll use my deburring tool to get rid of the little scrappy bits on the bottom there. I should maybe have done that first. Sorry about her barking. Right, so of course you can leave it at this if you want. It's very cute as it is. But I like to just do that extra step and add some snow. So what I'm going to use, I have some of this artificial snow, and as you can see it's got some little holographic pieces in it as well. So in one of my silicone mixing cups, I'm going to use just the normal UV resin this time by JDiction rather than the high viscosity, because we're mixing it with the snow and it becomes thicker anyway when you mix it, and it's just too thick when you use the high viscosity one. I have tried it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of this to this. Quite a bit, I think, because like I said, it does thicken up. Look how nice that is. I love the consistency of this stuff. There we go. Of course you could do this with epoxy rather than UV, but just for speed and ease, I've not got my epoxy out today, so I'm going to use this. A few pinches. Then I'll give it a stir and see what the consistency is like. Again, I'm not wearing gloves here because it's UV resin, but you keep yourself safe and use gloves if you want. So you can see does look a bit like snow. I might just add a touch more UV resin. There we go. Wow, I love it. I love it. The only thing is when you try to actually put it onto your piece, it's quite difficult because it wants to stick to the stick, if you know what I mean. Right, so I just basically want to put a little bit around all of there. It hides, I thought that was a cat again, it's a bird, it's a gull. Yeah, if you put some snow down, it hides where you've got the UV resin sticking to the base, you know what I mean. There we go. I will just give that a few seconds. I like to just give it a blast with the UV light until it's all done, and then I do like to give it a good few minutes because it has got the snow in it. It does take a little bit longer to cure, and you want to make sure it's properly cured. There we go. Now I'm going to put some in front of our little polar bear because they sleep in the snow to keep themselves warm. Sounds like an oxymoron, but it works. I may have made up a little bit too much snow, but I've got other ones of these made that I can always add it to. I also have a reindeer mould. I'll show you it in a second actually. I've done something very similar with. Right, because I've got some left, I'm just going to pop some into this little space behind them. Right, and what I'll do, I've still got some snow left, so I'm going to just pop a wee bit on this sign. And I would just do a little bit at a time and cure it. Oh, that bit's going to fall. Can I catch it in time? Can I cure it in time? Yep, I think I caught it. And I will give it another few good blasts of UV light just holding the lamp. But for now, I will show you it. Look, how cute is that? So before I end this video, I'll show you a couple of other angles of this, and I'll also show you a couple of other ones that I've done as well. But before I go, I just want to say another huge thank you to JDiction for sending this resin to me. I really appreciate it. I hope you've learned something from this, the different ways that you can use different resins to make your crafting life a little bit easier. I do have links to all of the JDiction resins that I've used in the description box, and there's also a 10% off code for you as well. So if you're wanting to purchase any of this resin, just pop that code in at the checkout. So I think that is everything. Like I said, you don't need to do exactly the same as this, but hopefully it's given you some creative ideas on how to do little snowy Christmas scenes for Christmas in July. Right, I'm going to head off now, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so, because I am going to start doing more craft tutorials. I don't just do resin, but it's mostly resin just now because I am hooked. So yeah, talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of this little idea. Let me know if you're going to try it. And I will see you in our next one. I'll leave you now with some more footage of my little snow scenes. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.